everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here today with you. Today, we have a special episode of your Explora podcast, UMES. In this podcast, we treat different topics from general interest topics, culture, education, professional growth, and much more. Today, this episode is brought to you thanks to Profesorados en Inglés de Universidad Mesoamericana. Well, today we have a very special guest. We have a Dutch professor from our university, and he's been a professor for many, many years, so he is going to share with us his experience and, of course, his knowledge. So welcome, Mr. Professor.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Thank you. Okay, teaching English here in Guatemala, it's something a little bit not hard maybe, but challenging. Let's call it challenging. Nowadays, our students have become they want more and different ways of learning. It's not the usual and traditional way of learning like lesson 1, part 1, right? Where you only have your CD player and the listenings and the same filling in the lines exercises. But we have the challenge of doing this differently, right? And that's why we're here with you to talk about teaching creativity. So what can you tell us from your experience about this topic?
So first of all, creativity is one of the most important skills, I think, especially for the world that we're living in now. The world is changing very rapidly. Nobody knows where it's going. And you need creativity to adapt yourself to all these changes. I think creativity is something that makes us human. It's like the same thing as thinking, and it is very connected to learning a language as well. Traditionally, like the type of class that you described, there's not a lot of creativity in teaching, right? It's a very big problem that a lot of young people, they kind of lose their creativity. I mean, I'm sure that you have children as well, right? And you were a child, so every child draws, right? Every child loves to draw. But then the child goes to school and what the child learns are the limits, right? Oh, I'm not good at drawing because the teacher says so. Or a tree cannot be pink. It must be green on the top and brown in the bottom, and the sky must be blue. So I think that traditional education can be a big problem for fomenting creativity. Also in language learning, right? Not all children learn the same way. And learning a language, like we learn our first language, is also a very creative process, right? The child begins by just listening to the parent speaking, and then there comes a phase in which the child is free to start speaking and try to mimic the sounds. And then if the child gets the right feedback, like a positive response, the child feels strong enough to try some things out, put different words together and try to communicate, really. So that is a very creative process. And I think that language learning, and for your learning English in Guatemala, must have a lot to do with also learning creatively, right? So that means that the teachers have to introduce creativity in their classes and also make the students creative, make them creative with language. So that's a little bit my...
So I'm getting it. So not only teachers have to be creative when teaching, but also they have to make students produce their own creativity.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Yeah. So creativity works in this way. First of all, you have to be safe and secure to be creative, right? If you are afraid of, or if there's a lot of pressure, nobody can be creative. So you need like a space in which you feel safe and not judged to be creative. Like if not, it happens the same way that it for a lot of young people happen, that they think they are not creative or they cannot draw. Like every child can draw and every child is very, very creative. But it's also very vulnerable, right? So if a child gets the wrong feedback, like you do not draw well, or that's not the way that you say this, or that's not the way that you write a poem, all of these things are signals for the child that, okay, I cannot do that. I have to move exactly the way the teacher tells me. So that's anti-creative, right? Because you just follow the rules. So you have to create this ambience in the classroom. Doesn't have to be the whole class, right? We have like content to teach as well, but maybe for 10 minutes to begin with, just a space in which children or students can be creative and can express themselves creatively. And maybe later I can give some examples of, you know, some things that teachers can do to be more creative. Yeah. But to be a creative teacher also means that you have to develop your own creativity, right? And well, I was a product of maybe not so a creative school, and maybe you as well, right? That
Yeah,
we
definitely.
learned more about the things that we couldn't do than about the things that we could, right? And you had to follow exactly the rules to make sure that the teacher was happy to get a good grade, right? So I think for teachers, first of all, it's very important to kind of be creative. That's the only way to develop your creativity, just to be creative. And that's difficult. And that's also a thing that you have to show students. Creativity is not easy. Creativity is taking risks, stepping out of your comfort zone. You have to be willing to fail a lot. And then maybe there is a thing, a product, and that's kind of the definition of creativity. It has to be spontaneous, and it has to also be, it has to have something useful to it. So it must be useful as well. So if you can develop that in yourself, I think you can be able to teach it and use it in your classes. What I found is that when I do these exercises, or when we do something creative in class, the students love it. Right? It's different. It's they don't know what's going to happen, so it's a little bit scary, but good scary, you know. They're getting a little bit challenged, so it's not, you know, they know exactly what's going to happen, so they have to do something. A lot of those exercises are also in group work, so they have to be able to work with other people. And yeah, I think it's something innate to people that we love it, right? It's very difficult to get a definition. What is creativity, right? But we recognize it when we see it, right? Oh, that's creative, or that's a creative person. Like we know it. I think that everybody is creative, at least has the potential to be creative, but it's like a muscle. You have to train it.
Definitely, you have to train it. And I mean, creativity is not only about art, right?
No.
Creativity has a very wide meaning of what it is. It can go from painting or drawing to finding solutions or making maybe something that already exists, but in a different way.
Yeah,
and that's exactly what teaching is about, right?
Exactly.
Because you have a lesson that already exists, but you have to find a new way to teach your children or your students, so they learn it in a new way, and it has to be something updated.
Yeah.
Because the same activities that you use, I don't know, maybe 3-4 years ago, are not the same, or are not going to work the same with students nowadays, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And definitely, I think when you were mentioning that they get nervous or they get challenged, when you are using your creativity, you can either lower your students' affective filter, which will enhance their learning, or you can raise it up, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So how do you what do you do to keep the filter low?
So yeah, like I said, first of all, it has to be a safe place, right? So everybody feels we're not getting judged. There's no points to win or to lose. And one way I do that is I rearrange the classroom. So if you normally everybody sits in rows, now I put the tables in squares. So they work in little groups. So the fact that they have a different area in which to work in, they look at each other now and not at me. They feel like, okay, this is not part of the formal classroom, and now we're going to do something different. So it can also, you can put some music, but you have to give a signal to the students like, now we're going to do something different. Now it's not memorizing and taking notes. Now it's doing something creative. And you're absolutely right. It's not only drawing, it's creative thinking, it's problem solving. Like we talked a little bit before about video games, and that's why young kids and also adults love video games, because you're solving problems all the time. Like as human beings, we're made for that, right? So it's something that's very motivating for us. So first you set kind of the scene for the creative process to begin, and then you kind of have to hook the students. Mm-hmm. You have to give them something that they can, I don't know, identify with, or a problem that they have to solve. Or it can be a challenge. And it has to be something outside of the normal. So, for example, if you teach writing, what I do, it's not writing a paragraph, right? It's something different. So, for example, I give the students the last line of a text, and they have to imagine what went before, right? And then they all read it, and we vote what was the best one. And all those aspects, what I just mentioned, are actually parts of the creative process. So first of all, you have this this preparation stage in which you deal with a problem or try to solve a riddle or a puzzle or try to make a drawing or anything. It can be really anything. That's a preparation stage. So the next stage of creativity is the incubation stage. And that happens when you are not busy with the thing. So that is why you have your best ideas when you're in the shower, for example, or when you're just driving in your car, something.
The traffic.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. When you're bored, it's a very good way to get ideas. So you kind of build that into the class or the problem solving. So they work on something, and then we do something completely different. They think it's we have free, but their minds keep on working on the problem. At least that's what the psychologists say. Then you have the illumination phase. That's the, I got a solution, or, this is it. Or, you kind of have that bulb. And then comes the verification phase, because now you have to see if it's good, really, what your idea is, right? So in an exercise, everybody has an idea. The paragraph begins like this, or the story begins like this, and then this happens, and then this happens. You kind of have to find a way so the students can publicize what their solutions are. So it can be a website, or it can be on Instagram. Any kind of thing that they can show their solution to other people is good, because that is the verification. Then they also see, okay, that is a better solution than my solution, without the pressure of losing points.
That's something important, because losing points is like, there are some students who get really into points.
Yeah.
And if they don't get a point, they don't move a single muscle, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's a good way so they can learn, both students, the ones who are kind of distracted or lazy, so they can get into work. Mm-hmm. And the process that you just described, I think it's very useful, I think, because it takes totally the full stages, right?
Yeah.
And in Bloom's pyramid, right?
Mm-hmm.
Creativity is on top.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if you can take students from understanding to the top, that is creating, you are making the whole process.
Yeah.
And the thing that you described goes exactly from bottom to top.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, creativity gives also meaning, right, to things, or a new meaning, maybe, to things. I also love these exercises in which the students have to think of different uses for a very normal object, right? So, for example, a comb, which you use to comb your hair. So I tell the students, okay, here's the comb, you can touch it. Give me as many different uses for this as you can. So apart from combing your hair, right? So they have to think creatively. That's thinking creatively, right? A new use, yeah. So they make an instrument, or they make, it can be anything, right?
A back scratching
A
tool.
back scratching tool, exactly, fantastic, right? So they get into that mindset of creativity, to think of other solutions. There's not one rule, right? I mean, how did they discover the smartphone? One person that thought, okay, what will happen if I combine a telephone with a computer, right? So I think that you can and you should do that in all classes, but also in language learning. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It's not only for language learning,
No,
but
no.
for right?
Yeah,
For
yeah.
everything. I know that there are teachers who are very creative with the activities that they have, and students really learn through those activities. And I think it's very important also that students create, right?
Yeah.
Through the process.
Yeah.
Like you said, what can you tell us? I know, maybe a couple of strategies on how teachers can have their students create in class or become creative.
Yeah. I think it should be kind of a moment in the class. And it doesn't have to be every class, every 2 weeks or something, right? If you have a weekly class, you can do something. And you can start very small and just see how it works, right? I think the first thing that you should do as a teacher is to get rid of your own limits, right? Because, I mean, you are a teacher, so you know this. You have this idea, and then you start criticizing yourself. Right? No, it's stupid, or they're not going to understand. Or so first of all, you have to put that away and just see it as an experiment, right? And do a 10-minute something creative. I mean, there's a whole lot of ideas on the internet, of course. But the best ideas is always that you can think of. Okay, how can I make teaching sentence structure more creative, right? So something that you can do, for example, is to divide the sentence up in the typical different things, right? The subject and the verb and the complement, exactly. And then have the students play with the structure, right? What could I change with the verb? And so they have to propose different verbs. Or what can I change with the subject? So they have to propose different subjects. So kind of like a game, but they're learning, what is the inherent structure of language. So writing, it used to be, at least for me when I was in school, it was the most boring thing that I could imagine, because it was always essays and it was always about subjects that weren't interesting to me. Reading was the same. I had to read books that I didn't want to read. So you let the students write about what they do want to write about and read about what they do want to read about. It's not that hard. You just have to talk to them and ask them and, okay, what do you want to write about? I want to write about video games. Great. Yeah, it's, for me as a teacher, it's not different, right? It does cost a little bit more time because you're not having that need. Everybody writes about the same subject, but they will show way more creativity. They will be happier, and I think the results will be higher when they write about what they want to write about.
Definitely. Let's think in another level.
Mm-hmm.
I know you work with Profesorado in Inglés,
Yep.
so every student there has a B2, C1 level